don't like monoculture, so there is not just dahlias in that border. There's the wonderful backing of all the lovely climbers on the back, and taller plants in front of those get integrated into this border, like ricinus, castor oil plant with big bronze leaves, the odd red leaf banana, which grows enormous with these huge paddle-shaped leaves. And at this time of the year, as the sun gets lower, the sun shines through the leaves, giving that lovely translucent effect. And I mean, it is stunning. The other plant that I must talk about there is the huge Eucomis, and it's Eucomis pallida, in brackets, polavancii.
Hello and welcome to episode 113 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, he's looking slightly festive, dare I say. It's not quite December, but you know. Red jumper, red glasses, looking suave, sophisticated, ever more handsome. At East Ruston Old Vicarage, Alan Edward Herbert Gray. How the devil are you?
Well, I'm absolutely fine, but I was actually trying to cheer up this rather sort of dreary day. It's been so wet everywhere, and it just seems as if that wetness is carrying on. And how is it for you in Cambridgeshire, Thordis Maria Sophia Fredrickson? Looking absolutely wonderful, I have to say, and you're cheering up the day as well. And I think that's a kind of crazy combination, because from here it looks as if we've got almost shocking Schiaparelli pink stripes on a red jumper.
It's pretty shocking. I picked it especially because you're right. Dingy, a little bit of sun just starting to break through.
Absolutely.
On this dull November morning as we record our podcast.
Well, we've got something cheery to talk to, someone cheery to talk to.
Well, we have, and this is slightly, I'm pleased with us. We've had a couple of weeks off. We've got ourselves back in gear after some autumnal lurgies, and last episode, we mentioned a certain National Collection holder. Eucomis came up, and it turned out that someone we know very well, who's never been on the podcast before, I'm sorry, very remiss of me, is the Eucomis National Collection holder. So Richard Clark of Panache Plants, based in Norfolk, which is why I've seen you at so many Norfolk plant fairs. Welcome along to Talking Dirty. Before we get stuck into all the plants, do you have any middle names to share?
My middle name is Joseph, after my great-great-grandfather.
That is lovely. Grandparents marked all round in our middle names, I think, which I'm very traditional.
Both my grandfathers, you see.
That's good. See, I should have brought my daughter on, because she's got much better middle names. Her middle name is Linnea, after Linnaeus, as in the botanist.
Do you know, I seriously considered Linnaeus as a name.
Well, to be honest, if we'd have had another daughter, I would have had it as a first name. But hey ho, there you go.
It's a great middle name, though. So, Panache Plants, how long have you been going? What's your background? Give us a potted history.
Oh, potted history of me. Oh God, I've been going forever, really. It feels like. So what did I do? I sort of started off as a plant breeder. So I worked for a commercial plant breeder based in Foxley, and then became a pollen dabber, and I've never finished, really. And I kind of, the origins of that is why I'm interested in plant collecting, because once you start breeding plants, I mean, it's the fascination of, you know, what's contained within those plants. And in order to get to that, you need to start with collections of plants, and, you know, it spirals doing that. So yeah, plant breeding was the origin. Then I decided to go into teaching as well. So I'm a qualified geography teacher as well. I'm not wearing sandals. I've got no patches on my arms or anything. Never taught geography. Ended up working in the college system. So I was teaching horticulture at two local colleges. And then in the end, I was working with Martin Davies. Martin was my boss, and I was the program area leader for horticulture, floristry, arboriculture, the works. And then my little girl was born, and I decided that I didn't want the stress of teaching, and we went back to Panache, really.
And Martin Davey, former head of horticulture at Eastern and Otley College, so the kind of primary place that you'd go and learn horticulture in Norfolk and Suffolk.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was it. So, which was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I sort of went on paternity leave and then didn't go back in the end. So, but hey, then went into doing what I do now. I mean, prior to that, I've always sort of dabbled. Panache had a guise beforehand, so I'm quite a favourite doing all the plant shows and messing around, and always been collecting plants. So yeah.
When you say always, as in always from boyhood, were you someone who got into gardening when you were little, or did you come to it later? Yeah.
No, always. I mean, I was collecting, as a little boy, I was collecting cacti, because that's what you did. I mean, my parents like going to garden centres, and I like going, and off you go. So yeah, always loved it. Loved being in the garden. My brothers and my dad were all devout Arsenal supporters, so they would all be in watching football, and I can't sit still for that length of time. So I just went out in the garden and never came back, really.
I can't tell you the amount of hope for my little boy I feel when I hear you two talk about collecting cacti when you were small.
Well, yeah,
it's absolutely right. You see, it's the kind of thing that you did. I mean, I went on from cacti to pelargoniums, and I'm talking about zonal pelargoniums, and it was because you were interested in things. And there was a man, we used to go to the coast quite a lot because we had one of those, which is Lass is no longer there. In those days, we had a chalet on one of the cliffs at Hemsby, and I think that cliff has swept away long ago.
Yeah.
And now there's hardly anything left. But and on the way there, we used to stop at this bungalow. I remember it, and the man used to say geraniums for sale outside, not pelargoniums, it was geraniums in those days. And used to trot up to the front door, knock on the door, and he said, "Go around the side, and you go into the greenhouse, and you pick whichever pelargoniums you wanted." And I remember they were 1 and 6pence each, and I used to have 1 and 6pence in 3 little packets in the back of the car, because I think, well, I've got one. I could have 2. I could have 3. And so it's just collecting different colours. And in those days, of course, they weren't the, dare I say it, sort of horrible little dwarf things that you see today. I mean, the leaf nodes were much further apart, so they had character, and you could grow them into tree-like things, and it was just lovely. So you move on from one to another. And I mean, I know that Richard's got many, shall we say, collections.
Yeah.
I think Roscoea was something that I think you were very good at. Well, you did a bit of breeding, didn't you?
Yeah, the Roscoea. I mean, Roscoeas are my absolute love. I think possibly.
Tell us what Roscoeas. Tell us what Roscoeas are, because I mean, lots of people might not know.
So Roscoeas are a member of the ginger family, but they're more of an alpine. So they're not massively tall. You're sort of talking about sort of 18 inches tops, really. So they're not huge, but they have very, very large flowers. The biggest flowers in the genus of the Zingiberaceae. And you get some brilliant colours. I mean, Roscoea purpurea, as the name suggests, is the purple flowered, and that's the one that I've done most work with. It's a brilliant garden-worthy plant. And for me, the best plants that I've ever produced from seed have come out of the Roscoeas. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Well, I remember a couple of years ago, because somebody told me on the gardening grapevine. Somebody told me that Richard had some wonderful plants of various shades of purples and mauve Roscoea at a plant fair. And I rang you up, or so I got in contact with you somewhere, and said, "Can I have some?" And your missus said, "No, we've sold out."
Yeah, that's the trouble. Well, hopefully we've got some going into bigger productions. So in the future, but yeah, they're not the quickest to bulk up.
No, but they do stand. There's one in particular that caused a bit of a sensation when it was launched a few years ago now, called Red Gurkha.
Absolutely.
And it has brilliant red flowers. It's quite a short one. It's only about, I don't know, 8 to 12 inches tall, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. But Red Gurkha is the origins of what I've been tinkering around with. Red Gurkha's not been around for very long, but I mean, it's fantastic, because I mean, this is Roscoea purpurea. Essentially, what were plants that were purple, all of a sudden in the wild, this brick red, variant is found. That's really, really interesting. And people had made crosses, and when you look at the initial cross between the two, you start to get a purple flower with red running through it, which from a plant breeding point of view is really, really interesting, because if I were to cross a red flower and a purple flower, I would expect the progeny to be either red or purple. not to have this mixture. So you get this slight little bit of red in the throat. If you start to play around with this, you get all and sundry coming out. And that's what happened. I made some initial crosses and I tinkered around, sowed the seeds, took about 3 years before they flowered. But I had a summer of every day, I was getting a new and different colour. And it wasn't just purples and reds. We're starting to get into pinks. We're starting to get into bicolours. We're starting to get into sort of dusky colours. Loads and loads of material. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, some of the stuff, it's just beautiful. It really is. These are excellent plants. But it then took another 3 years for them to offset, to start to clump up, that we had material. So I was looking at this, and you start to look on Google Images and you search and you think, right, have I got something unique here? Nobody else has got material like this, or certainly not that they put on the internet. I mean, if they had, they would be shouting from the rooftops, really. So I thought, wow, this is really, really good stuff. So we showed it to a plant promoter. So there's within the sort of the trade, there are people that deal with the big wholesalers across the world, and hopefully they will produce it in huge numbers. With Roscoeas, because they're so slow, need to get put through tissue culture in order to build up the sufficient numbers.
That's quite an expensive process, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, one company said it will cost us £1,000 per plant to put it through tissue culture. Can we have 10? Can you send us your best 10? And we put them all through tissue culture. So we're like, wow, this is incredible. This is really, really brilliant. Sent them the plants. They all got shipped over to Holland in their box. They moved offices, left them all in the boxes, and the whole lot died. So that put me back about 3 years. So we had to wait, and then we bulked them up again. They've gone out again. They've gone to other producers. So hopefully these will start to get produced in quantity. But it's the only way of ensuring that they continue. Because for me, I mean, I'm trying to bulk things up, but it's going to take me a very long time to produce sufficient quantities in order to have enough to sell. But hopefully they will do it, and these will be produced in number and get to the market, which to me is a wonderful thing. To get something to the market, get something that is so good that it will get to the market. Other people believe in it, is absolutely brilliant.
There's absolutely that. We're talking in terms of thousands and thousands of plants, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. So, which would be wonderful. And I'd love to see the productions. Sadly, I think they'll all be in Holland, but I'd love to see a production of a plant that I've raised up from seed, and then to be produced in vast quantities.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So, it does give insight into the behind the scenes on so many of the plants that we buy. The thing about plant breeding is it's not only the time that it takes, but you've got to, and you see this when I've been lucky enough to go behind the scenes at somewhere like Monk Silver, and you see all of the labelled up pots of snowdrops and things that are bulking up and getting to flowering size. There's the time, there's the organisation, there's the space. There's so much involved with plant breeding that we kind of take for granted when we go and buy the end result.
Absolutely. But I mean, working in the packet seed industry, the amount of, someone's life's work has gone into perfecting that variety. There's so much has gone on behind the scenes to produce that. And there's some incredibly clever people doing it. I spent a lot of time in California working with two very, very old plant breeders who were getting to the ends of their careers. And they had bred most of the marigolds that are available now. And they'd spent their life doing it. And it was technical breeding. It was, phenomenal bits of breeding. They were, a lot of the marigolds were bred for garlands. So that was the big market for them. So it wasn't necessarily, pot plants and bedding plants. It was the garlands and lays. The difficulty with marigolds was that they're fully double. They've got so many petals, it's very difficult to pollinate them. And they developed systems where they had apetalous males and apetalous females, who looked like shaving brushes, and they could cross them together, and then the seed that would come up would be the double petals would be restored in it. And it's like, how have you come up with this? This is incredible. So you've got this whole production system of how to do it, to produce them in these quantities. Phenomenal bits of breeding, but it took them their lives to do it. these are just annual plants. Imagine people that are breeding, introducing new varieties of trees and shrubs and things. It's a phenomenal undertaking to come up with something new.
On a lighter note, I mean, the ordinary gardener can actually have a bit of fun. I mean, I have a bit of fun every year by just saving some dahlia seed, and I have to say that I rogue out the ones that are sort of kind of too samey or not interesting, and all the rest of it. All my progeny are singles, which is to be expected anyway. But I mean, we get some fantastic colours, and I pot them and put them on a peninsula, so that people visiting the garden, they come past them, you see. And the amount of people that rummage after a label and they find number 4.
Oh well, yeah, that's it.
I said they haven't got a name yet,
No. But I mean, how wonderful is that? I mean, save seeds. And see what you get. You'll get something new. You'll get something lovely, and you'll get something unique. I mean, how wonderful!
I mean, I know this kind of sounds a bit sort of elementary, if you like, but I mean, every seedling is technically different from its parents.
Totally
genetically different. So you know there is the off chance that you might get something. I mean, if you cross a red one with a mauve one, you might get something muddy. Or you might get something which is mauve striped red, like you were talking about.
Absolutely. You might get something that is a phenomenal winner and will make you a fortune.
Or not.
Of course, the handy thing if you do it with something like dahlias is if you're lucky, it might be one that bulks up really well. And then at the very least, you can quickly create more plants, unlike with something like a Roscoea, and maybe give it to your friends, get it out there, just spread the love.
How lovely to have a completely bespoke garden with all your own plants. What a wonderful thing that would be. I grew everything here. I raised from seed. Everything here is unique to my garden. Well, that'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd also be very mean, Richard, because gardeners like to share things.
Absolutely. Well,
So
have
obviously,
plenty to share.
You've done a lot of breeding, obviously, with Roscoeas, and I'm sure lots of other things. Is there something that you wish you had the time, space, energy, whatever, to have a bit of a go experimenting with, or something that is sort of down the line that you dream of doing some breeding work with?
What am I playing with at the minute? Well, this year's little obsession has been Abutilons, which have been fantastic. There's some really, really lovely material in Abutilons. I think Abutilons are lovely, lovely flowers anyway, because you've got that lovely sort of exotic. They look like, some of them look almost like hibiscus. I mean, they're quite wonderful, and they've got a degree of hardiness as well.
Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Because lots of the large flowered hybrids tend to be fairly tender. Now we grow a large flowered hybrid called Ashford Red. And Ashford Red's been on the south front of our house for the last, 11, 12 years. And it's outside, no protection, perfectly hardy. But most of the ones that are regarded as having a greater degree of hardiness have slightly smaller flowers. But with that, quite often they have smaller leaves, which takes away some of the coarseness, which makes them a more valuable, perhaps, garden plant. I'm thinking of varieties like Pink Charm, for instance. I don't know whether you know that one.
No, I grow Pink Charm.
Yeah,
I've got better seedlings than Pink Charm. So...
Well, my dear boy, it's time you launched them.
Well, yes. Well, I mean, the point is, if you start saving seed, and then you start selecting, and you can select for hardiness. So you take those hardy parents and you take seed off of those. Hopefully, some of their progeny, you've got some of that hardiness. Hopefully, some of that progeny has got bigger flowers, smaller leaves, whatever you're looking for, different colours. It's a good thing. I think there's a lot of scope in Abutilons.
Yeah, I agree with you actually, because I mean we're doing a trial in conjunction with the RHS here of Hediciums, which is going to be a 3-year trial, and the aim is to sort of try and kind of push the boundaries and see which ones are going to be hardy and which. I mean, we know a lot of them won't be hardy, but we're going to try and see just how hardy they are, because I firmly believe that lots of Hediciums are much hardier, perhaps, than people think.
Absolutely. Well, I think the Hedicium's downfall is they look tender.
Yeah.
How can something so exotic and so luxuriant, how can that possibly be hardy? and that's the problem. That's the worst hardiness test ever. But no, Hediciums, I think there's lots of scope in Hediciums.
The second worst test of those is the fact that somebody comes along to your garden after a winter, which we just had last year, when we had sort of slightly lower temperatures than perhaps we normally do. Here we got down to -4, and the top rhizomes, which I hadn't protected of the dityums, was in actual fact put slushy, so they'd rotted in the frost. And everyone
Yes.
was saying, "Oh, you've lost your dityums." But of course, they have layers of rhizomes, and the topmost rhizomes were killed, but the bottom rhizomes came back. Not as vigorous as they would have done from the top lot, but they came back and they flowered. So, I mean, that's one thing to bear in mind. The other thing with hedychiums and with lots of other plants of suspect hardiness, if you like, is the value of a winter mulch, which I didn't.
Yes.
But I mean, one should do that. You should actually do that as a protection, if you like, just in case.
Absolutely. I mean, it's only the very top layer of the ground that's going to freeze.
Yeah.
So you haven't even got to do a particularly deep mulch, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
To your plants. But I mean, last winter was a hideous winter. I mean, we went through a very, very wet autumn. Everything was soaking wet and sodden. That didn't help. Prior to that, we'd had a baking hot summer that had, done a lot of damage.
And the wet bit that you just mentioned encouraged everything to grow new shoots.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
then we got these lovely cold spells, which just blasted it. But I mean, and it was sort of over the winter, there was very, very cold spells and then very mild points.
Yeah.
It was horrible. I mean, things like, potted geraniums were dying last winter, which is like, well, this is sort of a garden stalwart. This shouldn't be dying at all.
No.
I had no spring bulbs. All my potted bulbs went to mush because they froze solid.
Yeah.
It was a horrible winter. I don't think that you can judge things on last winter. But I mean, it goes back to the whole point of hardiness. There's a lot more issues to hardiness. It's not just the cold. Winter wet is probably the biggest killer. Does the most damage. But with these sorts of things, I mean, incorporate grit when you're planting. Make sure they've got sharp drainage. That's going to help. If you've got sharp drainage and a decent mulch, that's got to help, I would say.
When we first came to East Ruston hundreds of years ago, we were having a little drive. We were having a little drive around the countryside here, and underneath it was a south-facing bank outside a little cottage. There was a hedge, and underneath this hedge there was a plant which was called in those days Dimorphotheca. And I knew this was a South African daisy flower, and I said to Graham, "That shouldn't be here. That should be dead. I mean, that's not a hardy plant." Anyway, I stopped and we were looking at it, and this old lady or gentleman, I can't remember what it was now, came to the gate, and I said, "Your daisies you've got here, oh, would you like some?" They said, "You pull a handful up, because if you look along the stems, you can see there's lots of little roots. They'll all grow for you." And they did, and they are now known as Osteospermums.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying, reiterating really what you said, Richard, right plant in the right place.
Yeah.
A dry bank on a south-facing slope underneath a hedge, that's all the protection it needed, and it was quite happy. We've had it, I mean, that's 40-odd years. That's
it. And I mean, Osteospermums, again, there's a lot of mileage in those, so there's a lot of interesting material there.
Again, there's lots of messing about with them, though. Don't you find that the breeders raise all these wonderful colours and shapes, anemone scented, and some with yellow with a purple ring around the middle, and all the rest of it. But they're not hardy. They lack hardiness. And the other thing I think that happens to them is that I have the feeling, I don't have proof. You may, I don't know, but I feel that they have a dwarfing agent applied to them, because
quite possibly
they don't seem to grow with any openness. They maintain a sort of a fat little dumpling. And I feel it should have its wings and spread out a bit.
I mean, the dwarfing agents are quite widespread, certainly with sort of the bedding industry.
Yeah.
I mean, some things are selected to be genetically dwarf.
Yeah.
As well. But the thing is, they're not selecting for hardiness on these plants. No, exactly. They are selecting for plants that fit onto a Dutch trolley, fit into a lorry, look good at point of sale.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And preferably one that they can sell early, that dies in the first frost, and then you come back and buy another one.
Absolutely. There you go. That's good business.
It's interesting selecting for hardiness. If there was one singular good thing about last winter for me, I lost loads in my garden, particularly because I have lots of things in pots, so they just all died. And it was really quite cold in Cambridge. I shoved a load of things I just couldn't bring inside under several layers of fleece into what I call a potting shed. It's an old dog kennel down the side of the house, which is the mildest part of the garden. And everything died, really, apart from a couple of little things that I thought might pull through. All the Aeoniums died, apart from one, which I think might have been Velour. If it isn't, I'll put the correct one into the plant list for this episode in the show notes. But I was amazed, everything turned to mush, everything was destroyed. And this one Aeonium this summer didn't really look like anything bad had happened to it. And it wasn't out in the cold, it was given a bit of protection, but a level of protection which didn't, do anything for any of the other Aeoniums. So I've now at least learned, if I'm going to grow Aeoniums, considering I have nowhere to keep them, that is the one for me to grow. And see if others exhibit the same level of hardiness.
Well, Aeoniums are another one that I quite like.
Yes, you do love your succulents, don't you?
I do like a succulent as well. Aeonium simsii and its crosses. Aeonium simsii is a green Aeonium, but it's got a degree of hardiness to it, and it will cross quite readily into a lot of other darker leaved Aeoniums. And they're really, really good crosses, and they're much tougher. All of mine survived quite happily outside last winter. I mean, that's another one to push, because Aeoniums had a really rubbish winter in the main, but these simsii crosses did really, really well. I think they're really, much, much better for our climate.
Very excited.
Yeah, they're worth doing. And there's variegated ones. There's all sorts. There's loads of good stuff in those. And they tend to grow when it's colder.
Another little thing about Aeoniums is that if you grow more than one variety and you let the flower stems stay on them and the seed ripen, you can save the seed. And you can even, if you're in the right, again, underneath a hedge facing south, seedlings pop up in the spring, and you suddenly see this, and you think, "My God, it's a baby Aeonium." It's like a little frog, when a tadpole becomes a frog. They're tiny little things, aren't they? And it's a bit like that. And you're so excited when you find it. I put a pot full into the desert this year, and I mean the little seedlings now gone from being a minuscule little thing. Can you see my fingers like that? To about that big. I mean, it is a big saucer, and it's got a little bit of colour to it. It's green with a slight bronzing on the tips of the leaves. Who knows?
Absolutely. Well, it could be a good one. And it's new, isn't it? It's yours.
Mind you, we could be doing this podcast in the spring, and you say, "Alan, how's that Aeonium?" "Oh, he's dead."
Well, unfortunately, with all there's so many plants that are so wonderful, and you think, I've struck gold. This is something brilliant. And they die. The failure rate in this is colossal, because unfortunately plants are very, very good at tormenting you. You'll find the most lovely variegated thing, and you think, "Oh, that is wonderful," and within a few months, it's lost all that variegation. It's all just disappeared and gone back to normal again. So, or some wonderful flower form.
You do get this on certain variegated plants. I've got a variegated Sparmannia, and variegated Sparmannia will throw a green branch and then a completely white branch. Well, that white branch is no chlorophyll in it, so it's getting the chlorophyll from the green branch, if you see what I mean.
Right. Oh yeah.
So the kind of there's an instability there. It's not a uniform variegation, if you see what I mean. If I take a cutting of that green branch, it will stay green and be forever more green.
More green. Yeah. Well, you get this chimera effect, and it
absolutely, yes.
It appears and then disappears just as quickly. So.
Yeah.
But I do like the Sparmannia. I've got one growing in the polytunnel here, and the leaves are so lovely and felty. Yeah. And you can screw the leaves up on it, and they'd be completely undamaged.
Yes, that's right.
Bizarre plant. It's one of my little hobbies is screwing up Sparmannia leaves.
Well,
just because I can. But there you go.
That's fascinating to me, because I have a person in my life who loves nothing more currently than to screw leaves up in his little hand. So I need a plant that can be screwed up in tiny little baby hands. He did it to this. We were preparing for a podcast, and he got hold of one of these big leaves, and it's got a big chunk out of it now, thanks to my little darling baby. And there's a catinus by my back gate that he's always getting hold of leaves. They don't come back. So Sparmannia, that's on the wish list.
It's quite tough. Yeah, I've got one of those. They look so pleased when they come to you with like a handful of flowers, and you're like, no. But hey ho, not to worry. But at least they're interested, so that's good.
Exactly. Hello, Mr. Gray.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. A little titivation of the hair there?
Absolutely. Yep. A little casual flick.
surname is Clark?
Yeah, Clark without an E. That's
Never
me.
knew that before. There we go.
you go.
Just Richard of Panache Plants. And
Yeah, but, I mean, for most people in my life, I only know him by first name.
yeah. Is Ian there? Ian, hello. I haven't seen you for ages.
He's got a cold.
It's gone. I haven't seen him for ages, and I won't see him now.
Oh.
So, Eucomis National Collection holder, are there any other secret national collections that I should know about that you're
No.
hiding anywhere?
No, Alan's got more than me, hasn't he?
I don't think so.
What have you got? You got Colchicum, haven't you?
I've got Colchicum, yeah.
Yeah. Have you got another one?
No,
No, just Colchicum.
no, I don't want any more.
No.
Right, from the top. Hello.